Imagine a world where a small cut would often lead to death, or one in which cancer and diabetes were untreatable, where every virus creates a pandemic the likes of COVID-19, where food supply was extremely limited due to pests and invasive weeds. Imagine a world where LCD screens, solar energy, and adhesives were never developed. The world you have imagined is a world without chemistry, and it is just scratching the surface of chemistry's role in the world around us. My name is Joshua Pierce, and I'm an associate professor of chemistry at NC State. I present you this imaginary world to engage you in a very simple question. How is chemistry relevant? For me, this was something that was not evident early in my schooling. I was born and raised in a small rural town in northwestern Pennsylvania and attended a small local schools for my K-12 education. My parents, my mom a stay-at-home mom and my dad working in the forestry industry, were incredibly supportive of my education and gave me all the opportunities they possibly could. But they themselves hadn't attended college, and so they relied on the judgment of me and my teachers to plan my college journey. In high school, science classes were always of interest to me as it was a subject that allowed for real-world applications and was based on asking questions and finding answers. But since I was a child, I thought that medicine and the ability to help people was the career path for me. Science was therefore just a means to an end. As I applied to universities and ultimately ended up at the University of Pittsburgh, things dramatically changed. First, I moved from a small rural town to a large city, and as an only child had a roommate for the very first time. Second, from the first few classes, it was clear that university instruction and learning was different and required a different level of engagement for me for success. This transition was sometimes overwhelming, sometimes exhilarating, but certainly led to a lot of personal development and growth. I developed my course plan to map onto a path toward medical school and all the appropriate science courses I needed for that. Freshman year was a huge adjustment, but classes went pretty well and I felt on track. My favorite class freshman year was Honors General Chemistry, taught by one of the most engaging scientists I have come to meet and who had spent their whole career with a focus on educating students. I remember a class where many of us got called up to the front of the lecture hall to act out molecular motion and learn how the movement of people related to the movement of molecules in chemistry. At every moment, it was clear that they were passionate not just about the science, but about getting us to engage and love it, not just learn it. Although this was a great experience, the topics of general chemistry are very math calculus heavy, and I was starting to learn that was not my favorite subject. Sophomore year then came around, and it was time for the dreaded organic chemistry course, a course rumored to weed out pre-med students. Many friends struggled with the course, and a few of them changed their career paths to avoid it. That first semester of my sophomore year changed the trajectory of my career. How, you ask? Because I fell in love with organic chemistry that semester and had a professor who lit up the room, engaged with the class, and showed us how chemistry was relevant to a variety of topics, almost everything. And for me, the key was its clear tie into health, in particular drug discovery. Do you know where pharmaceuticals come from? Spoiler alert, it's not doctors. It's teams of basic scientists working together to develop treatments that are eventually clinically tested and prescribed by doctors. It was at this time in Pittsburgh that I knew I wanted to study chemistry and see where that journey would take me. I would ultimately finish my BS in 2003 while doing undergraduate research at Pitt, and then stayed at Pitt for my Ph.D., during which time I further solidified my love of organic chemistry and interest in drug discovery and health. After my Ph.D., the journey became a literal one when I got married and moved across the country to complete postdoc studies in La Jolla, California. It was in my postdoc that I further refined my interest in health to that to focus on infectious disease and the development of small molecules to fight bacteria and viruses. I applied to faculty positions around the country and ended up at a large university that was a clear fit for me at first sight, NC State. At this point, you still might be wondering how any of this applies to you. My story, perhaps similar to many of your future stories across a number of fields and career paths, represents a journey fueled by my desire to contribute to the human condition, but to do that in a field I was passionate about. Trust me, there were setbacks. Just one example is when I got a failing grade in a course for the first and fortunately only, time, and had to learn how to recover and keep focused. We could have a whole podcast on the ups and downs, but at every turn, it was the supportive faculty and mentors, the family and friends, who helped keep me moving forward. Which all brings me to my time here at NC State, beginning in 2012 and leading into this time of great challenge for our world, but also of great opportunity. As a tenure-track faculty member at NC State, I teach undergraduate and graduate organic chemistry and lead a research group of undergraduates, graduates, and postdocs in the area of infectious disease drug discovery. These research efforts are in collaboration with a number of other researchers across our campus and across the world. We'll get back to some of our own work in a bit, but first let's take a step back and discuss drug discovery more broadly. If I say chemical or drug, what comes to mind? Good things or bad? Toxic waste and Breaking Bad? Or cosmetics and cures for cancer? The public's view of science leads to potentially negative views of many areas, including drug discovery, driven by a hyper-focus on negative applications of chemistry or other sciences, overlooking life-changing and society-enabling developments that science has provided for us. So as scientists, what do? Science is built on facts, on the use of data to support hypotheses, and science underlies modern drug discovery. But long before science, drugs have been used, and even chimpanzees use medicine to treat some of their medical problems. It seems very likely that our ancestors too, some 6 million years ago and then in each later moment, also used natural medicines. Every modern hunter-gatherer culture on Earth uses medicines from the wild environment for treatment. The natives in Bolivia, for instance, rely on hundreds of different plant and animal species to treat different ailments. These natural medicines contain an array of molecules, in other words, chemicals, produced by nature. While these natural compounds are safe and lead to medical treatments, other natural compounds are extremely toxic and are present in many plants and animals. For example, poisonous mushrooms. Things that are natural are not necessarily safe, and things that are synthetic or man-made are not necessarily dangerous. Over the centuries, humans have realized that natural molecules can be modified to change their properties, and fully synthetic molecules can be prepared from bulk chemicals that can serve as drugs and ultimately cure diseases. While vaccines, the topic of another section, prevent disease, drugs treat it or cure it. Whether it be previous viral outbreaks such as HIV/AIDS or infectious diseases during World War I, drug discovery has altered the way we can live and has single-handedly extended lifespans around the world. As we find ourselves in the current pandemic, how can drug discovery experts respond? Large pharmaceutical companies such as Merck, Pfizer, and Gilead, as well as academic groups, startup companies, and government labs, are working around the clock to develop and test new treatments for COVID-19. So, that brings us to the question, how do modern drug discovery teams discover drugs? And how are scientists across NC State's campus contributing to this effort? It takes about 10 to 15 years to develop one new medicine from the time it is discovered to when it is available for treating patients. The average cost to research and develop each successful drug is estimated to be more than $1 billion. This number includes the cost of the thousands of failures along the way. For every 5,000 to 10,000 compounds that enter the research and development pipeline, ultimately only one receives approval. As in every field, there can be some bad players, but the vast majority of drugs are as expensive as they are due to the huge development costs behind them. Before any potential new medicine can be discovered, scientists work to understand the disease to be treated as well as possible, and to unravel the underlying cause of the condition. They try to understand how the genes are altered, how that affects the proteins they encode, and how those proteins interact with each other in living cells, how those affected cells change the specific tissue they are in, and finally, how the disease affects the entire patient. This knowledge is the basis for treating the problem. Researchers from government, academia, and industry all contribute to this knowledge base. But even with few new tools and insights, this research takes many years of work and, too often, leads to frustrating dead ends. Not to mention the years of clinical trials and country-specific hurdles for approval. While this is a challenging effort, the impact of a new drug is immense and can save millions of lives. At the core of this effort is chemists making molecules, many of which have never been prepared before, and handing these off to biologists to evaluate their efficacy.
Because there's some news coming out on Gilead. Gilead Science is out with some pricing news involving remdesivir.
Remdesivir is a small molecule that has been shown to slow the infection of healthy cells by blocking viral replication, stopping the ability of an invading virus to co-opt the body's cellular machinery to reproduce itself. In technical terms, it's known as a nucleotide analog, meaning it mimics a genetic building block, but with an unusual molecular group tacked on. The thinking goes that as the invading virus tries to replicate itself, the drug gets in the way and stops the process. Remdesivir emerged from work done by Gilead, our neighbors at UNC Chapel Hill, and the US government in the mid-2010s to test compounds discovered by the biotech giant against emerging viruses. Initial animal experiments seemed to show the drug could work against Ebola, leading Gilead to start phase 1 testing in 2015 and advance it to a mid-stage trial the next year. A large phase 3 study conducted in the Democratic Republic of the Congo showed remdesivir to be less effective in preventing deaths from the virus than the 2 other drugs, leaving Gilead's therapy with an uncertain future. But the outbreak of COVID-19 made suddenly relevant a series of experiments in human cell cultures in mice that indicated remdesivir could have activity against coronaviruses like MERS and possibly the new one now spreading. The data continues to look promising for remdesivir, and the FDA has approved its use. Gilead is spending over $1 billion for the production of this drug alone. The story of remdesivir represents a classic one in drug discovery. Constant investment and development is necessary to create a pipeline of compounds that could be useful in the next pandemic or the next emerging disease. Given the time to develop these treatments and the uncertainty of the future, these investments are more critical now than ever. At NC State, we have scientists working to develop novel treatments against COVID-19, against multi-drug resistant bacteria. If you don't know, many patients with COVID-19 die of bacterial infections, and treatments for a variety of other diseases from pain to cancer. For patients with viral infections such as COVID-19 or cancer, bacterial infections that take advantage of the reduced immune systems in these patients invade and are actually the cause of the patient dying in many cases, although this is frequently not mentioned when discussing the topic. Teams including groups in chemistry, such as ours, synthesize new molecules and use chemical biology approaches to study how they work in biological systems. Other groups in biological sciences and molecular medicine study them in more advanced models. Faculty in engineering study their preparation and delivery, while clinicians in the vet school conduct animal models and clinical studies. We even tackle these problems around the world through our global health program. Many of these research teams partner with companies to support this work, and most are supported by federal research agencies such as the National Institutes of Health. These efforts often lead to startup companies from our Office of Research Commercialization. So where does all of this leave you? Science underpins everything. Chemistry is everywhere. These fields underpin the food we eat, the medicines that save lives, and the technology we embrace. All fields at NC State are working together to advance the human condition and work to provide solutions to the current pandemic and those to come in the future. Challenges will emerge, but at NC State, the attitude is think and do. And we ask you to join us as we write the next chapter of discovery at NC State. The next life-saving technology could literally come from you.